I'm in East London, just walking along the street, going to meet my friend Sarah in her flat. Sarah is the founder of the Craftivist collective, and I know her quite well because when I went back to Oxfam after having Ramona, I went down to 2.5 days a week, and Sarah came on board to share my job with me. And so we ran the Activism in London together, and we made a pretty potent team, and it's going to be really good to see her and have a little chat with her about activism, how to turn your passion into a livelihood and self-care. So let's go knock on her door. You are the founder of Craftivist Collective. You are a firecracker.
Am I?
Yeah, and I still keep in touch with you a lot, like just following you on Instagram and Facebook and watching all the amazing things you're doing with the Craftivist Collective.
Kiddo, my online stalker.
But
a
each
nice
other's
one.
Stalkers.
Yeah.
Mutual stalking, that's so lovely.
Respectful stalker.
yeah, consensual. Can you tell me a little bit of your activist story?
A little bit, yeah. So I grew up in a low-income area of Liverpool called Everton. My dad is still the local vicar. My mum was a nurse, full-time mum, and now is a local politician. Oh. So one bit in my story is there's a picture of me aged 3 squatting to save social housing from demolition, and we won. I became head girl at school and campaigned for lockers for my peers and won that campaign in a very quiet way, so no demonstrations or petitions. Campaigned at university and then ended up as an activist campaigner for a few different charities, including working with you whoop, whoop, in Oxfam, and then burnt out totally in 2008. When I was working for the Department for International Development and travelling a lot, and was also joining lots of activist groups because I cared about so many issues, but was doing far too much stuff, very extrovert, and I'm an introvert, which I didn't know at the time, so I wasn't sure why I was so exhausted, even though I cared deeply, and found that craft, as in handicraft, really helped me think more strategically with my activism. People were asking me why I was crafting, so I thought, what if I craft political stuff and have conversations with them, and started making little craftivism things. So it's been, yeah, very traditional campaigning, and then burn out, and then looking for new ways to do campaigning that doesn't compete with other forms of activism, but is a form of activism for introverts, a quiet form of activism, intimate activism, giving gifts to power holders to build relationships with them, which is just as powerful and just as important as the marches and the other big demonstrations, I think.
And why do you do it? Like, what do you believe in activism? Like, why?
I wouldn't do it if I didn't believe in activism. And it's hard, as we've talked about, when things can take so long to change, or you do so much and you get a little win and then you end up going backwards. Something happens and everything you've worked for, you know, you change to law and then the law goes back to something else. So it's really hard work, but I always remind myself of change in the past. You know, we've got the vote as women.
Yeah.
Lots of countries still don't, but that was through campaigning. I love Martin Luther King, so I read his book of sermons all the time to remind me of what he's done and what Rosa Parks done, and what, you know, my mum and dad still live and work in a low-income area, and they've helped win social housing and health centres and done amazing stuff.
Yeah.
So I'm always reading positive news of what's worked, and also trying to improve on activism that doesn't work.
Yeah.
But yeah, I wouldn't be doing it unless I believed in it.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't be doing craftivism if it didn't work.
Yeah.
You know, I have an email inbox folder when I get emails from people completely out of the blue saying I took part with one of your kits or your workshops or read the book or free resources you've said, and then I've done this, or I've changed the way I buy things, or I've taken part in this. I keep all them in an email inbox, so when I have a wobble and think what's the point, I reread a lot of the emails to be like, this does seem useful, I can always try and improve on it, but I wouldn't be doing it if it didn't work. Be too selfish, I think. Yeah.
Now, you mentioned a little bit like burnout, being an introvert. Now, this is a question that comes from one of my patrons who asks,
hello, lovely patrons. You're amazing.
Yay. You also have some supporters who keep you going, don't you? Dr. Craftivist. So we love our little support teams. Thank you. You really do. So one of my patrons, she asks, what advice would you give to somebody who struggles with anxiety, who really cares deeply about the issues and they want to show that they care, but they get quite easily overwhelmed or anxious or frightened? What kind of thing?
One, it's horrible and can feel really lonely, but there's more people like you than you think. So I think, don't think that you're awful or, you know, you can't do anything. I only realised I was an introvert a few years ago, and it was huge for me to be able to be like, oh, this is why I need a nap after all my activism stuff when everyone else wants to go to the pub and have fun. I'm like, I'm not weird, I'm not ineffective, I'm just different traits. And I'm more extreme introvert, so HSPs, which is highly sensitive people, which means you get overwhelmed very easily, which sounds like one of your patrons might feel that way, but I think see it as a real strength. So I know that I get overwhelmed easily, but I also know that because I'm a highly sensitive person, I pick up on stuff that others don't. So I think, don't think you've got to fit an activist mold. Be like, what am I really good at that might be different? If I'm really anxious, is it because I'm really sensitive? And that's a strength. So if you're lobbying a politician or a board member or speaking to someone about an issue you care about, you can pick up a lot of their feelings, their senses, their tone, whether you think they believe in something or if they're getting defensive. You can pick up on a lot of that and then help them go, okay, well, why do you feel that way? Tell me more about that. And what about this? Could this help? And this is the campaign I care about. What do you think? You can be much more in tune with people. So I love that in my workshops, it's quite weird that I have lavender smells, I have instrumental music, I have particular tablecloths that are certain colours and fonts and patterns, because I know for certain people it attracts them in, like anxious people, but it's really hopeful, and I'm in tune with a lot of that, and I read a lot on neuroscience and psychology of how it can help different people. We have grapes that people can share, which is very communal, and plants on the tables, and all of those elements. I wouldn't have thought about that if I wasn't a very sensitive person that gets anxious, but it helps people who aren't as sensitive as well. So you can have a real strength if you see yourself as I have a little, if you can see it, I have a jigsaw piece tattoo right there, and that reminds me to be a piece of the solution, not the whole puzzle, but be your one piece, and everyone's a different jigsaw piece. We're very different, and we have different skills and passions and the way we do stuff, but we're still part of wanting to improve the world. So for that lovely patron, I'd say you're one unique piece of the puzzle, and find out what gives you energy, what you're really good at, what you can improve on, but where you can be the best fit for activism. Start there.
Great advice. I totally agree.
Okay, good.
If
you disagree,
I'll be like, I'll just cut that out. Okay, so one of the things, Sarah, that you have done so well that I reckon people would be really interested in is turn your passion for crafting and handicrafts into a livelihood. And I feel just about. But you know, that is a challenge, isn't it? Like, and on one hand, it feels like we live in a kind of world where you can take your passion, your energy, and turn it into a job, and we're kind of told to believe that we can, and
we see it on Instagram. It's all so glossy and perfect,
but it's really hard.
It's really
hard to do. And I get emails probably a few a month saying, how can I make a living on Instagram? And I'm like, can't.
Yeah.
But you, I mean, yours isn't an Instagram living, but it is, you know, you've taken something that you love and you know, that's your job now. Do you have any advice for people who would like to try that?
Well, I think first of all, my passion isn't craft, it's activism.
Yeah.
So if the craft, for me, activism's always the priority and craft is the tool. And if craft didn't work in activism, I wouldn't be doing it. I'd still be making Christmas presents for people and birthday presents, because I know the joy that a bespoke handmade gift gives to people.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't do it if, you know, I am proud to say we've changed laws, we've changed business policies, we've changed hearts and minds through my general protest craftivism work.
Yeah.
And if there was no evidence of that, I wouldn't do it. And also, I'm very reluctant. I was very reluctant and still always am to have this as my job, because it's so stressful and you don't make a lot of money. I live in London because this is where my community is, but it's really expensive to live here. But I do it because it works and because there's a need for it. So I set up the collective because people wanted to join me in my own craftivism, and I thought, as much as I like doing stuff on my own, if there's a real demand from this from burnt out activists, for people who love craft and want to use it for good, then it felt like a duty, not in a negative way, but it felt like a good service for people. There wasn't anyone out there doing what I was doing, and I thought, well, I've got an activism background, so I know about strategy and how activism works, and I'm using crafts to serve that. And if people want to join in, then I should be there to support them. And it does bring me joy, and it's very fulfilling, but it's not always fun. But what keeps me going is, if there wasn't a demand for it, I wouldn't do it. If it didn't work, I wouldn't do it. I'm really stubborn, so I say no to most well-paid jobs coming in if it's from corporations that I think are good washing or green washing and not doing it for the cause. I am lucky, like you, I have people who adopt a Craftivist, so people who give me £10 a month so that I can focus on doing the right work rather than just gigs to pay the rent. But it's really hard, and I'm lucky that I don't have a partner and kids or a mortgage, so it's risky. So I'd be careful of, it's not always great for your mental health doing something on your own. But what would I encourage you to do is, are you doing something that's got a social good beyond yourself? So does it have a social purpose? Is it contributing in a positive way to society? Is there a demand and a want for it? And if you've got those two things and the answer is yes, and it seems to be giving good in the world in some way, then I think you should do it. Whether it's part-time, I did it part-time for a year before I took the leap, because I don't have a trust fund, so I had to be very cautious. I never want to be in debt. So I had to be cautious, but the more people say, oh, this is really helpful, that really keeps me going. But it's not easy. And you don't get sick pay and holiday pay. And but it's also, I'm very lucky. I do believe in what I do. I always want to improve it. There does seem a demand for it, so that keeps me going. But it's all about whether I can be of service, which sounds really like, oh,
I love that idea.
That's what keeps me going.
I think it's a really beautiful way of framing it. Is like, can you turn your passion into a service? I think that's really beautiful.
Because there's a risk that if it's just your passion, you could then label yourself as what you do, because it's about you, and then it's about your self-value through your purpose, which can be unhealthy. And the more we look to contribute to society, we know from all the evidence that helps our well-being, to feel part of society, and not every like is what, however many followers is about me and my passion. It's actually a relief to be like, this isn't about me. And that's a huge relief to be like, okay, this isn't about me, this is about providing useful tools and kits and resources for people, supporting people, doing some campaigns people can join in. Like, the more I tell myself it's not about me, the more fun and fulfilling it is, and the more helpful it is. I think.
Also,
do you agree with your one?
Yeah, totally.
Because I feel like we sort of do similar stuff.
I also think a little bit as well that it's about different measures of success as well. So
in lots of ways, I'm completely a failure.
Totally. Like, out in the world or whatever, you're measured by basically your income, aren't you?
And your looks.
And you have to really let all of that go.
And your followers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so if
Your
you see it
age.
as a service as well, that also helps, because it's like your measure of success is about how well you are supporting people.
Yeah. And I do think you've got to do it, you know, coming back to the last question, you use the, you know, the skills you've got, the passions you've got, where you gain energy, you know, it's not all about service if you hate what you do, and if it completely burns you out. You know, I was a burnt out activist because I thought I had to do had to do all the marches, had to mobilize everyone. You know, I'm good at it, but it wipes me out. Yeah. So there was a selfish part that I had to be like, to be able to serve well, I need to do it sustainably. Yeah. So what do I love doing? Well, I like working on my own from home, and then I do the talks and I do the workshops. I collaborate with amazing people, but I love making the kits on my couch. Yeah. You know, listening to a podcast with my little plant I need to water. You know, you've got to find that balance of the passion and what you're good at, but using it for good. Yeah. Without it being so. I love Oprah Winfrey, and she talks about filling your cup. You can't overflow with what you do unless you fill yourself up. Okay. So you always have to think about what can you fill yourself up with. So I love art and good films and amazing books. So if I can fill myself with that, then I can be of use to people, rather than if I just give everything of me away. Okay. I've got nothing. I'm actually less supportive and helpful and worse at serving because there's nothing left of you to give.
So you've actually brought me to the next question perfectly. Amazing segue. So this is Sarah's book, which I really highly recommend. It's a beautiful book, How to Be a Craftivist, and it's The Art of Gentle Protest. So it's really beautiful. I loved it. I read
matching it a little bit. Sorry.
It's like a yellow thing going on. But I love how in this book you really see the whole person is important, not just like the activist thread of that person or the productive part of that person. It's the whole person is of value. And you know, you mentioned a little bit about some of the things you do to fill your cup. How important is self-care for you, and what sort of mindset do you bring to self-care, and do you have any rituals that you kind of like grasp to kind of keep your cup full?
Yeah, I mean, at this current time, I'm going to sound like a hypocrite because I'm feeling pretty wiped out. I'm taking on too much, as always, and feeling exhausted. But I do, I mean, self-care is really important. I think with anything in life, everything's attention. You want to serve the world, but you need to support yourself. You want self-care, but if you do too much self-care, it's navel-gazing, or you're looking at yourself too much, which isn't good for our own mental health. So it's always a balance, but my sister's great with me because if I can sort of turn into a hermit because I do like being on my own, and I'm lucky that I've got a little studio that I can live in and love sitting around in. But my sister will be like, when's the last time you've been to the cinema? Because I love going to the cinema because I love films, but also you can't multitask in the cinema. Yeah. So for both of us, that's a sort of measurement of, have I given myself some self-care? Like she says, when's the last time you've gone? And I say, oh, last month. She's like, you haven't had a day off then, have you? I'm like, no. Yeah. So that's a big one. And lucky I have a bath that you've seen. That for me, that's really important, to just be in water, read a book, have a candle. I go swimming. I try and go swimming twice a week. I always go once max, but that's a real, like, I have to make time to swim for health reasons. And do yoga. I try and do yoga every morning. I do it twice a week normally. You know, I'm not good at it, but I try and really make sure that I'm healthy in myself. And then also it just helps with work. So if I find myself stressed out and fluttering around and I've got shaky hands while I'm sewing samples or making kits, then that really forces me to take a step back, because if I'm doing everything rushed, I'm not doing it well. So that's not good for the job. Yeah. But also it's a real, like, so much of my work, I love the fact that handicraft really helps you be mindful of how your body is, or if you've got tight shoulders, are you doing stuff too fast, are you impatient, are you feeling really sluggish or wired on caffeine. Like, I'm lucky that my work is using your head, hands and heart, so that naturally checks you in with self-care. Yeah. And also, you know, if we look exhausted, no one's going to want to join our gang and join in your campaign if you look completely wiped out and unhealthy and negative and angsty and, you know, cynical. And so for the causes, we have to show how joyful it is to live more ethically, to treat people with kindness, to think about, you know, what we buy, what we wear, and you know, it's a much nicer life.
You go to church as well, don't you?
I do.
How important is your spirituality in your activism and life?
Good question. For me, it's huge. I mean, the Craftivist Collective is secular, so people of all faiths and none join in, and I'm very sensitive to make sure that's clear. But I'm also very honest that for me, as a Christian, Christian principles are, you know, underlying and threaded through my work, which is very universal. So I never want to do activism that others people or demonises them or patronises them. I grew up in a low-income area where people would be like, we'll come and save you, we'll give you our second-hand shoes, and would make me uncomfortable. And we had a giant, it was a very white working class area, but we had a giant poster of Martin Luther King on the wall, and would regularly hear stories about him from my parents, what he did. And when I was 8, I went to South Africa on my dad's sabbatical to see what Desmond Tutu and Mandela were doing. And we were always taught as kids and in our church that social justice is part of you practicing your faith. So yes, there's stuff people twist in the Bible that's really unkind and cruel and unethical and, you know, unequal. But for me, all of the wonderful, loving parts is definitely what I want to put into practice.
Final question, Sarah. Tell me about the kind of world that you dream of.
Oh, I'm doing a new project on dream making. What do I dream of? A healthy, happy world where we're surrounded by beautiful birdsong and happy plants, and everyone's living in harmony, and we celebrate our differences knowing that we're all the same as well, and everyone looking out for each other and wanting to make the world a gorgeous place for each other. That's what I dream of.
Cool. That's beautiful.
Is that too vague?
No.
Okay.
No, because we can all cling to that.
And it would look different for both of us. So I'm a city girl, so I want to be in the hustle and bustle of London town in a kind way. You're in your gorgeous yurt. I love the fact that the world includes both.
Yeah, and we just need to rewild both of those places.
Rewilding. Yeah, that is one of the keys, I think.
Yeah, it is. Love your work.
You too, love.
You're making that world happen.
I'm trying.
And that's the thing, like, something to remember, is that anybody that is working towards kindness and empathy in their interactions, anybody that is bringing that open-heartedness that we spoke of, is, you know, bringing about that kind of utopia.
And I always have to remember there's people like Lucy in the World being your jigsaw piece, and other people, like, what are all these brilliant people doing as part of this jigsaw puzzle, so it's not all left on just one of us to do. Like, there's so many amazing stuff going on there, and we just don't see a lot of the good news, we see all the bad stuff. So be an amazing jigsaw piece, knowing that there's loads of us in the world trying as well.
Awesome. And check out Sarah's stuff. I will link to her things below. And wherever you are in the world, much love to you, and stay radical.
Stay radical.